Hi, I'm just going over the new Unity 2018.3, and while I was doing that, I also downloaded the Unity Hub. And this is the Unity Hub here, the little link, and when you click it, it kind of starts up, and I can pick my projects, or it has like this link for some Learn stuff. And this is the main one. This is the installs. So on my machine, it shows me the installs I have on my machine. I could look at the official releases and go all the way back in time. And then I could even go into the future here and look at the beta releases. So, you know, this is pretty cool. This is, I guess, the reason that this is here. So anyway, on my machine, I have these two versions. Uh, and I could go to projects and open up something from here. I could still use my regular Unity link, but I think I'm going to use Unity Hub now to make sure I have the latest versions and stuff like that. It's kind of easier to download from. So what I'm going to do tonight is I'm going to do a project and I'm going to show how to, oh, this is cool too. I could pick the version that I'm using. I'm going to show how to use the new terrain tool because it changed. It changed. And it's something that when you look at it at first, it's not going to look like the normal terrain tool that I was used to from before. So let me just pick my folder here. The project name's terrain, and I'll say create project. So let's let the project come up. Okay, so my new 3D project here, it opened up. I got a camera, I got a light, and I'm going to add in a terrain. Okay, so I'm sorry, but make sure you select the top level. That's where I want to add it to. Right click and say Game Object, 3D Object, Terrain. And it's going to add a terrain in. Here's a little corner. If I double click on it, it's in the view. Okay. Now, the biggest thing here was that when I first did the terrain thing is I noticed like, whoa, where's all the buttons? They're all gone. It's only got 4 buttons. So if this is the new terrain, why does it look like there's less things I could do? But that's not true. I still have all the things. It's just that they're grouped under the buttons that are here. So this one's the brush tool, and this is the one I probably spend the most time in, like working on the terrain. And the thing that you have to notice here is that there's a drop down. So when I press the brush tool, there's a drop down here that picks the different things I could do. And some things are new, like the stamp terrain and the create neighbor terrain. So I'm gonna do the paint texture and I want to look for a texture to put on my terrain. And this is just something I always do. I always look for seamless textures. I just go on the internet and type that. And the reason I want them to be seamless, when something's seamless, that means when you put them side by side, you can't see the lines of where they connect. And let's see here. Probably want something to be like the ground. So let's pick like grass for a seamless texture and just pick something here. Don't be too picky like this one. All right, so I'll just right click and save this to my desktop. I'm on a Windows PC. Save it to the desktop. And that's one texture I could use, grass. And then I probably want another texture, something like that's like stone. So let's see if it shows anything here. Stone. All right, since maybe I'll have some hills and mountains, so I could use a stone texture for that part. Um, which one do I like? This is cool. Uh, this is cool. I think I'll come on, Omar, pick. Oh gosh, I'll just pick this one. All right, and save that to my desktop. So now I have these two images on my desktop, at least, and I'll just drag and drop them into this area of Unity so I could use them, and then I don't need those anymore. Now, make sure I have terrain selected and the paintbrush and paint texture. And now what I got to do is I just have to click this edit terrain layers and I have to add a layer. And when I add a layer, I thought I was going to see the thing to pick a picture here to put on. Perhaps it was, I know it's, okay, create a layer. Okay, the first one's a create. And here's my two images. I'm going to use the grass first, and then the whole terrain should be covered with the grass. So if I zoom in real close with the mouse, you could see the little grass. And right now you're probably noticing one of the differences with this terrain tool. You notice that this little, the brush tool, it has a nice little shape to it. It's not just an X. And that kind of shows to the user what type of thing they're going to draw with the brushes. Let me just make this a little bigger. So now that I painted my terrain green, let me go back and do the raise and lower terrain. And I have brushes here, and it also allows me to create new brushes if I wanted to. So let me just start off with this one. And the brush sizes could get much larger now. So anyway, this is something. I'm just going to add some hills here. And I could also pick other shapes to do this with. And you can see that they'll work. That still works the same. And if I want the terrain to go lower, I just hold down the shift key and then work it with the mouse and it can go down. Okay, so right here, the thing that you'll notice is different is just that. It's the brush looks different, but you could still do the same things with your terrain going up and down. Then over here, the stamp terrain, it's supposed to be that, like, you know how I rub it and the terrain goes up and down? With the stamp terrain, I could pick a shape, a brush shape, and a stamp height. So right now that's at 0. I could pick a height higher than 0. And then when I see, it shows me just how high I would put it. I don't want it to go that high. Let's go to 25. And then I could stamp the height right there like that with the stamp terrain tool. I could pick another shape. So that's new, the stamp tool. All right, so that's the difference here with the paintbrush. You have to remember you have this drop down with these things in here. On this other one, create neighbor terrain, this is a massive terrain already, but should you want to add on another terrain on the side of it, let me just wait for this baking ETA thing to catch up here. Let me use the eyeball thing and just look from the top. I could use the create neighbor terrain, and then there's these 4 boxes. I could pick one of them and add a terrain into that section. And there you go. See, 2018.3. Go back and do it smoothly will as if it were one terrain. So now I do I'll pick the rocks and paint. That's where I want for the trees or around assets. And in the search bar, I'm just going to type speed trees so I could find the speed trees that I could download. And it's showing things that cost money, things that are free, and I want the ones that are free. So where's that little price filter thing? I'm going to undock this window so I could make it bigger. And then the menu shows price. And I'm just going to pick free, and that'll definitely shrink down the asset store. And here it is, the free speed tree package. All right, so I'm just going to download this. It has like 3 types of trees. And the button may say download, but if you've downloaded it before, it'll say import. And then when it finishes importing, that window goes away. I close my asset window, unless I want more assets from somewhere else. And right here is a speed tree package, free speed trees. All right, so now with the speed trees, I'm going to go back to the terrain, and I will click on the tree icon, and I'll say edit trees. The first thing I have to do is I have to add some kind of tree. So when I click that, this window comes up, and I have to pick a tree prefab. So I'll click here, and the speed tree package has these trees in it. So if one of them here says mobile, that means the tree is a little less complex, and it'll draw, Unity will draw this tree faster, but it's a little less complex. It doesn't look as nice. Then these that say desktop, they're more complex. All right, but still, they're speed trees. They are pretty good. So I'm going to add the first tree that I want. All right, and if I wanted to, I could use a brush to place some of these trees in the scene. And there is a density setting which I could lower, and if I lower it, that means for the size of the brush there's less trees, and if I increase it, then for the size of the brush there's maybe some more trees. And of course, you could do the brush size. Whoa, and I just made a forest. Can I do undo? Now if you kind of place some trees and you don't want them there, you could use, say I want to remove all the trees to start over, I could press the Mass Place Trees button and say the number of trees I want is 0. And don't keep the trees, and then I say place, and that removes the trees from there. What about these guys? um, and these trees over here, let me reduce the density. And I could draw these trees in, and if I were to zoom in, you're going to see that, whoops, zoomed in too close. It's basically like a forest in here. All right. Um, I could draw trees like that, and if I added more trees, then it's kind of like when I was doing the paint. I picked a tree I want to kind of draw around in my level. So now I pick the broadleaf tree or the conifer tree, and I pick the size of my brush and the density. There's some other settings here, and then I kind of draw. I could draw in the conifers. Okay. So now, these trees are a certain height, and the random height is from the lowest to the highest over here. So I could just use that and shift the whole thing, or I could pick one of the edges and just drag the edges to change the tree height like that. Okay. And the locking the width to the height means that the tree kind of keeps its same size. The tree rotation means the tree, will be turned at different angles. But let's see now with the conifer that I made it that it could be like really much smaller or bigger, or maybe what I want is much bigger, right? So now if I kind of click these conifer trees, they're randomly drawing, and some of them will be higher than the others. If I just totally move this thing up, these are the bigger conifer trees. See? So you could control things like that. And with the speed tree and the terrain, you kind of get a nice looking jungle in there. All right, so for the paint details, if I want to add some grass, I'm going to need something because right here it says add grass texture and it's asking for a 2D texture. Now, you could say I have a grass texture here, but this grass is for like a looking top-down effect. And what I want is a grass that is from looking from the side effect. So grass, image, I'm just going to do that. Yeah, you see, so I want grass that's looking from this point of view instead of the looking down at it from the top point of view. So let's see if I could find a good image that is something that I could use. Okay, so I clicked my cartoon button at the top here, my Google Images, and then I click transparent because I need it to be a transparent image. And I'm scrolling down here, and this one looks like it could work. So let's see over here when the image downloads. I'm happy to see that this checkered background is showing because that to me shows that this really is a transparent background. So I'm going to use this image. So I'm going to save it to my desktop right here and say save. And then I could close the browser window. And then I'm going to drag and drop this into my scene. And it looks a little funny. That's because right now it's like a default texture type, but if I change it to, I think if I change it to be a sprite and say apply, then you can see the transparency right there. Okay. Now I'm going to go back to my terrain. I'm going to pick the first terrain, not the neighbor terrain. And as a matter of fact, I'm actually going to put this on the neighbor terrain since we have all this space out here. So let's see, I have the terrain selected, either one of them, I guess. And then I'm going to here pick the paint details button. And here's the edit details. I'm going to click that and I'm going to add a grass texture. So now when I click this, I should have my grass texture that I have from right here. I'm going to pick that. Okay. And let's see what happens if I just leave these with the default settings here. I say add. So now I'll have this brush here and I'm clicking to add, but I don't see anything. It could be because I'm so far up that, I'm right. I is so far up that I can't see the grass, but something was happening when I did click it. And you know, grass is not something that's very tall. So each of these grass blades that are drawn here, oh my God, there's so many. They are just this picture here drawn as a billboard sprite that faces myself. So we got a field of grass here. All right. And let's see what happens if I want to remove the grass, or if I want to change the density of the grass. Let's see if I could edit the edit. I'll bring this back up. And we have the healthy color and the dry color, which you can see here. It has the grass in two different shades. We have the min width, the max width, the min height, the max height. Okay. I think if I wanted to remove the grass, that I'd have to do this then? Would I have to say edit details and remove to remove all that grass if it was too much grass for me? So let me just put this little down and maybe if I change the opacity, now I'm going to add the grass back again. Okay, and I'm just going to, there we go. So for each press of the button, I'm getting a lot of grass. And let's see if there's any other things I could do with the grass. Not that I'm seeing here. All right, so that's adding grass. And the other thing that you could add for the edit details was a detail mesh. So I guess that could be like rocks and stuff. So first I have to find a mesh. So I'm going to try to go back to the asset store and see if I could find some free rocks, some free rock meshes. So I'm going to open up the asset store window. It kind of It keeps opening up docked for me, but I just want to undock it so I can make it bigger like this. And then I'm going to type in paint details maybe. Let's see, because that's the thing I want to use, paint details. And say rocks maybe. And let's see what the search comes back with. Then of course I want it to be free again. So I go down to this and let's see what we get. Here's rocks and boulders that are free. Here goes a single rock that's free. So let's try a single rock. All right, so I'm going to take this single rock. And I never downloaded it before. So here it says download. Now this is going to be 15 megs, 22 files. So I press the download button and it wants me to log in. Why would it want that? So fine, I logged in. And now I'm going to do the download. So it's downloading. And I'll say import it. That brings it into my project. So these are the files. I'll say import. Okay. It's called single rock. All right. Now I'm going to close the window for assets, and I should have a folder called single rock right here. Okay. So now I'm going to click the terrain again, and I'm going to see if I could do the paint details, edit details, and add a detail mesh. So now this detail mesh, instead of a texture, it wants a game object. All right, let's see. I click here, and in the scene, I don't have any game objects. In my assets, I do have some game objects. I have these rocks, and they don't look the way I wanted them to. So let me just come out of there for a minute. Let me see what this rock looks like. I just downloaded it. I know nothing about it. So in the prefabs section, oops, zoomed in too close. Ugh. Let's just get like that close. There's these prefabs. I don't see anything when I click on the prefabs. So this may have been a bad asset to use. Let me try find another asset instead. Back in the asset store, this time I just typed the word rocks to search for stuff and see if I get something better. As I'm looking through the rocks, I see the previews here. They look pretty nice. There's this thing called Quick Look, where I could just click on it, see how many megs it is, see what they look like. This is supporting 5.5 or higher. And I'm going to try this one. So I'm going to download this one this time. Let's see if this one works better than the single rock that I downloaded. This is the Rocks HD pack. Okay, say import. Import. It's called the Rocks HD pack. So that's what I'm going to be looking for in my when it finishes. Okay, so it finished importing. And let me go back up to the root in my assets folder. So single rock, it didn't work out for me. I don't want to use it, so I'm going to delete it. And here's the rock pack, I guess, that I downloaded. And these are the prefabs of the rocks. And see this one, at least I see some pictures. And if I drag them into the scene, I see that they do work, okay? So let me just delete that rock, press delete. And let's go back to the terrain. And let's add some rocks over here. Or at least let me focus over here. So I click the terrain, and I click the paint details, and then I click edit details. And I'm going to add a detail mesh. And now let's see what we got. So in the scene, I don't have any rocks to add, but here in my assets folder, I do. So I'm going to try adding this rock and double click and say add. And there we go, we got a rock. So now if I click on this and I use a brush tool, all right, it's painting grass. Is it painting grass and rocks? What is it painting? Oh my God, it's painting rocks. It's painting rocks, but the rocks have the color of grass. Oh, that's not what I want. So let me go here, pick the rock, edit the details, and edit. And here, yeah, it's got the rock and it's doing colors and it's rendering it like grass. I Not sure what I think it should be rendering it like grass, but the colors are, I don't want it to be green. So let me see what I do about that. This has a alpha transparency. So instead of it having the full color, I guess I could turn the transparency down so the colors don't show. And over here's another one. And just set the transparency down. And I just want it to be like that. And maybe over here, if I say vertex lit, that it'll draw the rocks as rocks. Yeah, that looks better. So this is doing rocks, but they are like literally right on top of each other. And I wasn't expecting that. Maybe I could control that with the opacity and the target strength. And now I'll try drawing some more rocks. Now I set these much lower and they're still coming out kind of like in clumps. Let me set the target strength almost down to nothing and nothing comes out. Let me set it to like 5. And the opacity is already at a very low opacity. Ooh, that's hard. So I think, what? The target strength went back up to 1. I want this to be really low. Hey, anyway, there goes some rocks when you get close enough. So we have all these things in here now. The best thing to do would be to make a little character so we could actually walk around and see how our terrain looks like from, a game player's point of view. Because looking at it from up in the sky, that's not the same thing. That's like when you're flying in an airplane. And then finally, when you land the airplane, you're like, oh, it doesn't look so pretty anymore. So let's do that. Let's add a character. So I'm going to click sample scene. And for the character, I'm just going to add a capsule shape, just a default Unity shape called a capsule. And where does that capsule go in this huge world? I'll just double click. And here's the capsule. And if I zoom out, I bet the capsule's under the ground. It is. So let's just try saying for the Y to make it a positive value like 20. Okay, now I see something right there. Let's zoom in. Okay, so the capsule's above the ground. Now maybe I could just move it with this a little bit. Just want to put it somewhere in the middle and bring it closer to the ground. Let's zoom in. Ah, I went too far down. I went under the ground. We're gonna get this. We're gonna get this because we know I think we know that our terrain's at 0, so it can't be a negative number. So maybe if I make it like 5, and this is a part of the terrain that was flat, this will have me above the ground. And there you go. So now I have my capsule, and I could look around it, and it's there in the scene. So if I'm going to use this as something I can move around with, I'm going to add a rigid body to it so it could like drop and walk on the floor. And so it doesn't fall over, I'm just going to freeze the rotation on the X and the Z. I'm also going to add a collider. And oh, wait, I don't have to. I'm sorry. The collider's already here, guys, right? Here's the capsule collider and a rigid body. So now with the capsule with a rigid body and it already has a collider, let me just align the camera to this point of view because you see what our camera's looking at now. It's not looking at this view over here, which is the one that we like. So a simple way to get the game view to look like our scene view is you hit the camera and then you press Control Shift F and then they match up. Now, if you didn't know the shortcut Control Shift F, you hit the camera and then you say Game Object, Align with View. Does the same thing. See right here it says Control Shift F, and that's where I got the shortcut. All right, so now the camera is at least looking the same way. I added the rigid body to my capsule. Let me press play, and let's just see if it works that the capsule drops to the floor. It does, and it doesn't fall over. It's not falling over because I froze the rotation on the X and the Z. So for example, if I didn't press the X and the Z, then for freezing the rotation, then when he kind of drops, oh, he's so lucky he's dropping and he didn't tip over. But anyway, this is what you're gonna do. It's the shape. The shape of the capsule is kind of round. He could easily tip over. So just freeze the rotation on the X and the Z. And now we're gonna add one more component to this so we could walk around. We're gonna add a script. If we want to have any kind of control, we're going to have to add a script. So we'll call this player. And then we'll go into the Visual Studio by double clicking on the script. Okay, and now we're going to go into Visual Studio because that's what we're editing for the C# script. All right, so I'm just going to start typing. I'm going to take out these two functions that are currently there. And I'm just going to start typing. The first thing I need is a variable to say how fast my player is going to move around in the game. So I'm going to make a public variable, public float move speed. And by default, let's say that he's going to move around at a speed of like 5. It's a big world out there. And then we're going to have another public float for look sensitivity. This is for when we move the mouse to look around. How fast does it move in angles? And I'm just going to say 90. And I'm also going to add another variable, sorry guys, float for jump force. Like if I press the jump button, how much power does he have to jump up? And I'll just set that to 5, all right? And now I'm going to type a bunch of stuff in here, but I'll freeze the computer so you could have a chance to copy it. So I have these values, and the reason they're public is so they could show up in the inspector, all right? Now, first thing I'm going to work on is the update function, private void update. And update is an event that the model behavior class will call every frame per second that the game plays. So if you're playing at 60 frames per second, this will call like 60 times a second. Float horizontal, input dot get axis, horizontal, float vertical, input dot get axis, vertical. Okay, through the power of magic, poof, the code is all there right now. And I'm just going to review what we have here. So we have the public variables for move speed, look sensitivity, and jump force. Those will show in the inspector in Unity. Then we have the private variables for a camera, a rigid body, and a renderer. So the camera is part of what we have to use. We're going to attach the camera to our capsule's head. It's going to be like the player's eyes. And the rigid body, we're going to have a pointer to the rigid body from Unity so we can control the jump height when we jump up. We're going to like use physics to add force to jump up and then let gravity just pull us back down to the ground. Okay, and then over here, we're going to make sure that the camera that is a child of our capsule, our player, we're going to make sure the camera is in the right position, like around where the head is of our character. So let's do that. First, we have to get the child camera. That's a child of our object. So you know what? We don't even have a child of our object yet. So let me just hold on right here and go back into Unity and make the camera a child of our player over here, the capsule. And since this capsule is going to be our player that we're going to walk around in, why don't we just name it player? So it's not going to be confusing. And here's the camera. I'm just going to drag and drop, make it a child of the player. But I'm not going to have to worry about positioning this camera because the script's going to do that for me. All it has to have is that the camera is a child of the player. Now when I click on the player, I think I did save my script. So you can see here, these are our public variables. All right, we got the camera as a child. So over here, when I say cam equals this transform get component in children camera, it's going to find that a child of the player, is there a camera? Yes, it is, and it's going to get a pointer to it. It's going to position the camera in the center of our player, and that's what this rend is, the renderer. The renderer, which is right here, the mesh renderer, this renderer component actually knows where the player is rendered in the game. Like wherever it draws a picture of this capsule, it knows just how big the capsule is, just where it is. So that's how come I get I'll come over here, I get the component renderer. And even though says renderer and this is a mesh renderer, the mesh renderer is a renderer, and it will find it when I use the word renderer over here. And the renderer, like I said, it knows just where it draws a picture of our player. And here it gets the center of the player, and it makes the camera equal right in the center of the player. But we don't want the camera looking out of our belly. So we're going to move the camera up from the center by the size X of our player. Okay, we're just moving it up a little bit. And then for the rotation, like which way the camera is going to look, we're going to have the camera look the same way our player is looking. So over here, if this is the front where our player is looking, the z-axis, the positive z-axis, that's the front. When the camera attaches, it's going to turn around and look to the front too. So that's what this does. It sets up the camera. And this curious little line over here, cursor lock state. See, I'm moving my mouse cursor around the screen. That's great. You know, I'm not playing a game. But when I'm playing the game, I want the mouse cursor to be locked into the game screen. So when I move up, down, left, and right, I don't see my cursor going off the screen. I got to bring it back. So since we're using the mouse cursor to control how we look in the game, looking up and down and everything, we have this little command that locks the cursor into the game screen. And this does that. Cursor lock state equals cursor lock mode locked. Okay, so we set the camera, we set the cursor, and now we're ready the game starts playing and the update function starts happening over and over again. So over here, these lines of code control me moving my player around. So there's two axes, and axes mean that the values are going to be not just a solid value of -1 and 1 or 0 and 1. They're going to be all the values in between 1 and all the little decimals and fractions all the way up to 1. Okay, and if I'm not moving the horizontal axis, the value will be 0. And that's the same thing for the vertical, values from -1 to 1. So over here, I'm going to look at whatever the input is for the horizontal axis. It could be a -1 or a 1 or minus 0.5 or a 5. And it's going to move me left and right because this is translating on vector right. And the vector right is the green, is the red, is the x-axis. So that'll move me left and right. Then over here, I'm going to use the vertical axis to move me on the forward axis, forward and back. So the forward axis is this blue line, forward, and back would be this way. So if the value is negative, instead of going forward, it just reverses direction and goes backward. Now the look around, it's a little bit more complicated because we have angles, but we're going to read the mouse. And you're like, a mouse doesn't have an axis, or maybe you won't. But actually a mouse, I'm going to read the mouse X, which is if I'm holding the mouse in my hand and I move the mouse left and right. So it is moving on the x-axis. And then if I have the mouse and I move it up and down in my hand, then that's the y-axis, okay? Now over here, the local rotation of my object, I'm gonna, whatever it is, whatever the rotation currently is, I'm gonna change it, I'm gonna multiply it by a certain amount of degrees, all right? So if I am moving my mouse X, moving it left and right, I want my actual player, that's why I use this. This is referring to my player object. I want my player to turn to the left and turn to the right. So to turn to the left and the right, I have to turn on which axis? I have to turn on the up axis. See right here, the up axis? So if I put a little spindle in my head over here, then the only way I could turn is left and right. So that's why I'm turning on the up axis. The camera is going to turn with my head because the camera is attached to me, right? So the camera is a child. So when I turn left and right, the camera is going to turn left and right. But now how do I look up and down? To look up and down, I'm going to control the camera itself. So right here, I have the camera itself, and I'm going to turn its rotation up and down. So which axis is it for me to look up and down? Let's look. So here is the player, right? And this is the x-axis, and if the camera's on my head and it turns up or down, the axis that it's turning on is this one, and this is the x-axis. Okay, and x-axis is like the left and the right. Okay, so that takes care of us looking around. Then over here we see if we press the jump button and we just add some force in the up direction, choo, and then gravity, of course, will bring us back down to the ground. And this button is something we need. Since the cursor is locked to the game screen, like when I want to stop playing the game, I'm going to have some way to unlock the cursor so I could press the stop button. So I'll press the cancel button, which is the escape key. The jump button is the space key, okay? So here's our script, and I hope you had time to look it over. Just to make sure, I'm going to scroll through it real slow, and you can press pause on the video if you need to copy any pieces of it and type it in. And I do see that that part is cut off, so I'll make this bigger. Okay, and that's all the way to the bottom. These are all the things, okay? Now, if you need the script, you could always go on omarvision.com and you could look for the, on the Learn section, look for the video there, and you could click on that and it'll have the scripts and everything, okay? So that's the script. We took a lot of time on that. Now just press play and let's walk around and see it work. Let's see how our world looks. So you can see here, I'm looking around and I'm going to walk here and look at these nice trees. Oh my God, they're so beautiful. And I'm in the shade here, I'm walking under the trees. Then I have these rocks. Ooh, my toes. Ow, ooh, ow, ooh, 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 ow. My toes are hurting, but I walk through the rocks. And this is where that big star was. Let's see what happens. Oh, I could jump. I could be happy and jump. Doon, 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 doon. And I could also like keep on jumping, and it's almost like I'm flying. Woohoo! Where's that grass? Where is the grass? After I show you the grass, then I say the tutorial's done. Hey, that's funny. Look at that. There seems to be a little line. Maybe this is, there's the grass. We're almost there, folks. So let's see how it looks. Look at that. The grass is blowing in the wind. Ooh, isn't that cool? And grass even has the shadow on it from my character. So this is the new terrain system in Unity 2018.3. It's pretty similar to the old one with just a few new tricks, and the inspector window has things moved in a few new places, but there you go. Enjoy whatever world you create. Escape and stop.